development of a genre can be a really interesting thing to watch. You'll see very early experimentation followed by a big breakout hit, followed by countless imitators. Some of these imitators will surpass the original, and some of them won't. In our case, the big game is Resident Evil, and the imitator is Sega's Deep Fear. Released late into the life of the ill-fated Saturn, it's gained a bit of a mystique since it was only released in Japan and Europe. Notably, Deep Fear was the last first-party release for the Saturn in those regions. While some games of the time relied on the original haunted mansion trope, Deep Fear takes place in an underwater facility called the Big Table. You play as John Mayer, a former Navy SEAL who now works with the Emergency Rescue Service, a civilian organization that performs rescue operations. Things start to go awry when a long-lost NASA capsule is recovered. People start turning to monsters, and it's up to you to contain the infection. The setting for Deep Fear is pretty neat, and it comes with its own in-game system. Because you're underwater, you have to manage oxygen in the area represented by a big timer on the top right. If the number goes down to 0 or you're underwater, you'll have to manage your air gauge. While this meter depletes over time, firing weapons also consume oxygen. There's a couple of ways to replenish air. The main one is to use the yellow terminals to restore oxygen to the rooms and your rebreather. The other, for more emergency situations, is to use an air grenade. Unfortunately, this really undercuts the tension of this system since you're always a save point away from restoring air. For the controls, it's pretty standard Resident Evil stuff, but it uses the Saturn's buttons well. A and C are the main action buttons, B cancels and menus, but also dashes. The nice touch is that if you hold back and you press B, you'll do a little hop backwards. X displays the item menu, Y displays the map menu, and L shows where you are on there. One rather interesting note is that if you have the 3D controller for the Saturn, the analog stick does not use tank controls. You just move the direction the stick is pressed. This didn't work for me on a third-party controller, so make sure you have an official controller if you want to move this way. If you press the right shoulder, it draws your weapon, and in this stance, A and C will fire. Aiming can be a little bit finicky, but you can toggle on the auto-aim option in the menu, which I would highly recommend. Unlike Resident Evil, bolts are replenished by visiting weapon lockers. This is another system that I felt shifted the game, for me at least, away from horror and more into action. I never ran out of bullets, and if I got low, I could simply go back to the locker. To be fair, the game does account for this by having respawning enemies. Health is also kind of infinite. If you run into a place with a first aid kit, you can max out the number of the lowest level health kits you have. Running around with a little bit of health left and begging for another herb is definitely a thing that I enjoyed about Resident Evil. Having these first aid boxes is definitely another mark against Deep Fear as a horror game. I think the big turnoff for most people will be the terrible voice acting.
I asked Dubois, the designer, to come too.
Oh, there's no problem with my CFOX system. No accident should have occurred. Oh!
While this is pretty bad, is it really that much worse than Resident Evil?
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
Honestly, at a certain point, I just found it really funny. Overall, I feel like Deep Fear fails as a horror game because of how forgiving it is, but I don't think it makes a bad action game. If you're willing to look past the cheesy voice acting, I think you'll have a good time. If you want to see me playing more retro games, I stream on Twitch. I'll see you later. Bye.
Ooh!